Suncraft is a cozy crafting adventure developed and self-published by Spicy Tuna Games. You arrive on a small island where the economy has slowed to a crawl, the environment has been knocked out of balance, and the lighthouse that once protected everyone has been sitting offshore in ruins for generations. Your job is to help put things back together, which begins reasonably enough. Gather some wood, mine some ore, build a machine, help a neighbor. Then 15 hours pass, and achievement informs you that you have personally extracted 50,000 resources from the earth, and you are standing inside a chest-based industrial municipality, wondering when exactly you became the island's contractor, courier, chef, mining department, and deeply underqualified supervisor of supernatural labor. Suncraft contains a lot more than its gentle opening suggests. But the moment that best explains the game is not a giant machine or an ancient mystery, it is Hank's shop. Hank runs the local market, and his daughter Penny tells you that he still expects everything to look perfect, despite the town producing roughly one customer a week. And yet, the shelves are stocked. The floor is clean. Hank stands behind the counter like the island economy is not slowly collapsing, merely running a few minutes behind schedule. At first, I thought this was just funny. Penny has the exact tone of a teenager who loves her father, but has also been asked to polish a display case for an audience composed entirely of dust. But the longer I played, the more that shop started to feel like the heart of Suncraft. Hank does not keep it ready because business is good. He keeps it ready because allowing the place to fall apart would mean accepting that business may never return. He is preparing for a future he has no proof is coming, and without realizing it, I spent most of Suncraft doing exactly the same thing. Moving into the tough stuff, art and visual design. Suncraft's pixel art is bright, warm, and immediately readable, but it never feels scrubbed clean of personality. The character portraits are expressive without becoming overdone, and their smaller sprites still feel connected to who they are. Penny looks young, alert, and entirely prepared to explain why her father's expectations are unreasonable. Hank carries that gentle steadiness of someone who has decided optimism is now a maintenance task. Nikko looks like a person who has not met an ancient machine he did not immediately want to open. And Kale has the permanent expression of a man who has seen too much, but will stop everything if his cat Soot requires a fish dinner. The island itself feels cohesive while giving each region its own identity. The volcanic area is hostile without becoming miserable to look at. The ancient laboratory feels strange enough that reaching it carries weight. The snowy region is operating under its own private rules. Hank runs an inn up there. The inn has no mechanical purpose. You cannot manage it. It does not generate passive income. There is no hidden hospitality system waiting for you to complete 6 linen upgrades before guests agree to sleep indoors. It mostly gives the villagers somewhere else to gather while Hank dresses with suspicious seasonal enthusiasm, and a penguin stands nearby conducting business that is clearly above my clearance level. And I love the absurdity of it. Suncraft is so full of systems that the inn feels almost rebellious. It is not there because it improves your production efficiency. It is there because people need places that are not useful. Somewhere to gather, somewhere to sit, somewhere for a penguin to silently assess the community. That makes the island feel lived in rather than assembled. The lighthouse is also a powerful visual anchor, but the ruins themselves are strangely easy to miss unless you deliberately pan the camera toward them. Considering how much emotional weight that place eventually carries, I do wish the game had taken me there earlier. Not to begin repairs, not to unlock another machine, just to stand among the ruins for a moment, maybe have a story beat, and understand what the island had spent generations looking for. Suncraft builds a beautiful symbol but keeps it at arm's length for a little too long. Still, the visual design is cohesive, charming, and noticeably more polished in the full build than it was in the demo. Art and visual design gets a 4.5 out of 5. And once the island begins filling with furnaces, workbenches, ghost bees, and enough loose components to alarm local wildlife, the sound design is what makes all that labor feel good. Sound design. Suncraft understands the ancient crafting game truth that repetition needs excellent noises. Mining has impact. Gathering has a satisfying little burst. Machines click, chirp, clunk, and hum as they spit out an inhuman amount of components. Furnaces crackle nearby like small industrial creatures whose only emotional need is another piece of fuel. Every time a component finishes, the game gives your brain a tiny confirmation biscuit. Yes, you made the thing. Yes, the thing was worth making. No, you made may not rest. The next machine requires 12 of them. These sounds matter because Suncraft asks you to repeat actions thousands of times. I know this because the game presented me with an achievement for gathering 50,000 resources. 50,000. I did not feel victorious. I felt caught, like I had done something ridiculous. What do you mean, 50,000? Has anyone checked on me in the last couple days? What day is it? Does Hank still consider me a customer, or have I been formally absorbed into the island's utilities? But I digress. The soundtrack is gentler. It sits behind the work rather than constantly demanding attention, but I did catch myself humming it after I stopped playing. So apparently it had moved into my brain quietly and begun decorating the space. The music supports Suncraft's tone beautifully. It keeps things warm without pretending the island has no sadness beneath it. The world can feel peaceful while still carrying the weight of what happened here. I might have liked one or two bigger musical moments during the final story beats, but overall, the soundscape does exactly what it needs to. It makes the work tactile, it makes the island comforting, and it makes the production lines feel alive before they consume every resource you own. Sound design gets a 4.5 out of 5. Which brings us to the part of Suncraft that will either move directly into your brain or send you running from the island before copper wire becomes a recurring dream. Gameplay and mechanics. Suncraft is not a traditional farming sim, and I will tell you that for free. You gather wild fruits and vegetables, but you are not planting seasonal fields, managing crop calendars, or waking up at dawn because one vulnerable turnip has become the emotional center of the household. This is a structured crafting adventure with a clear progression path and an actual ending. You begin with simple tools and simple requests. Then raw materials become processed materials. Those become components. Components become machines, and those machines mainly exist to help you create something larger that has arrived with several new concerns regarding iron. Eventually, asking whether you have copper is not enough. Do you have copper bars? Do you have copper wire? Do you have enough fuel to keep producing copper bars and enough room to store the wire? Enough emotional resilience to discover that the next blueprint requires 30 couplings and the entire economy you built over lunch. That escalation works because almost everything you gather has somewhere meaningful to go. A stockpile does not remain a stockpile for long. You admire it, you feel powerful. The one project consumes the entire thing and leaves a single iron bar behind to warn the rest. The skill tree gives you some control over which parts of that process remain painful, but I do not want to overstate it. The important thing is that nearly every upgrade feels useful. Unlocking certain skills can help you carry more, gather faster, extend furnace fuel, improve production speeds, or strengthen the ghosts and bees helping around your base. Early on, I invested in auto-click improvements and personal inventory space. My pockets became magnificent. Unfortunately, Future Sky did not really need more pockets. Future Sky would have appreciated longer-lasting fuel and a logistics department. Present Sky had prepared to personally carry civilization in her trousers. There is also an upgrade that allows the Dirt Investigator to produce every type of gem. I discovered this only after spending an embarrassing amount of time waiting for particular gems to appear naturally. The skill tree did not offer any sympathy to my struggle. It simply opened the records and confirmed that the suffering had been optional the entire time. The automation becomes one of the game's most satisfying developments. Once you place one example of an item inside a chest, the ghosts learn where it belongs. They begin collecting matching materials from the ground and delivering them to storage. They work constantly. Oh, that's right, I should explain. So at some point in the game, you will acquire the ability to hire in ghosts. And you can do this through solving particular side quests throughout the map. These will not be obvious, you have to discover them, but they will lend you a spirit on completion. And listen, I don't make the labor laws on this island, and if post-death workflow is what was originally bargained for, who am I to stop them? They work constantly. No complaints, no breaks, and no union representative has returned my calls. With a few upgrades, the ghosts and bees removed a huge amount of repetitive movement. Your base slowly stops feeling like something you personally operate and starts feeling like a tiny economy moving around you. I just realized I needed to explain the bees a bit too, so here it is. Early in the game, Kale helps you communicate with a giant bee who lives in the lava field. This bee had seen you hauling magma rocks back and forth between the lava and your furnaces, and graciously decided that this job would be so much easier for itself to do for you. Perhaps it was inspired by your altruistic nature, but certainly for the rest of the game, it worked tirelessly to make sure that your furnaces would remain as fueled as its little wings could muster. And while it is flying around, popping magma shards into furnaces, you walk between machines checking production while attempting to project the confidence of someone who planned all this. Unfortunately, the little economy economy still lives inside a chest metropolis. I had chests for ores, food, so much food, components, rare materials, decorative items, and things I had picked up once and become too frightened to put down because Suncraft trained me to believe every pebble was one quest away from becoming essential to national security. The storage system works, but shared storage or a proper warehouse building would improve at least my experience with the game. That is one of the clearest places where Suncraft's complexity creates a little bit of friction instead of satisfaction. The other is progression clarity. The farming amulet became my personal nemesis. Higher levels unlock new wild produce, and at one point I desperately needed vegetables that simply were not appearing to me because I did not realize they were locked behind that upgrade. I checked all the regions. I checked the shops. I waited for restocks. I looked through my equipment. I considered whether the ocean might eventually produce vegetables alongside the butter already arriving through my fishing traps. However, I will tell this to the devs. At no point did I look inside the codex. This small tab that consistently sits to the right of my vision, watching me fumble through the situation. Were I to look in the codex, it would tell me that the amulet needed another upgrade. The game had placed the information somewhere reasonable and allowed me to conduct an island-wide investigation everywhere else. And then, the feast quest found every weakness in my planning all at once. One innocent request for dinner expanded into cooking, gathering, fishing, money, equipment upgrades, an entire fleet of fishing traps, pulling pantry goods from the sea with no regard for culinary law. The executive chef in me objected with ferocity, but the gamer in me saw an efficient supply chain and chose corruption. But even when that quest slowed me down, I was never simply waiting. I could complete other orders, improve my equipment, rebuild my production chains, gather money, and explore. Suncraft's bottlenecks usually expose what your economy is missing, then give you several ways to work around the problem while you recover. Even the order board keeps the repetition connected to the people. Nikko asks for advanced components because he wants to test another scientific theory. Kale usually wants something for soot or supplies related to watching the volcano. The jobs repeat, but they never feel like requests generated by a spreadsheet wearing a villager's name tag. Jeremy would like 10 wood and 2 stone. The gameplay is tactile, cohesive, and deeply satisfying when all the systems begin feeding into one another. Storage could be smoother, and important upgrades occasionally reveal themselves later than I would prefer, but the work always feels like it is building toward something. I say gameplay and mechanics gets a 4 out of 5. That sense of purpose is where Suncraft's story quietly overtakes the machinery. Story and world building. Suncraft's official description calls it a cozy village crafting adventure about restoring a lighthouse. That is true, but it also dramatically undersells what the lighthouse means. Hank's family gives the story its emotional shape. Penny understands the present. She knows what the town needs. She sees how weak the economy has become. She has enough teenage sharpness to point out how absurd it is that Hank keeps the market spotless when almost nobody comes through the door. But Penny is still there helping him. Her frustration is not distance. It is the frustration of somebody who sees the problem clearly and cares anyway. Hank keeps looking toward the future. He maintains the market because letting it fall apart would mean admitting the town might never recover. Then as the game progresses, you learn that his son Nikko is missing. Finding him will lead you into the ancient laboratory and toward the deeper history buried beneath the island. Nikko is a technological prodigy. He loves complicated science, old machines, and mysteries that would cause a more cautious person to step away from the sealed door. Through him, you learn that his distant ancestor helped create both the laboratory and the lighthouse. That completely changes the restoration. The lighthouse is no longer simply a giant machine waiting at the end of a crafting chain. It belongs to a family history. One generation helped build it. Later generations lived beneath the consequences of its destruction. Now one of their descendants is trying to understand what happened and find a safe way to bring it back. Nikko looks into the past, but not because he wants to stay there. He wants the truth because the island cannot move forward while its history remains locked inside ruins. Eventually, his curiosity becomes the foundation of the plan that moves towards restoring the lighthouse. Penny understands what the island needs now, Nikko uncovers what it inherited, and Hank keeps preparing for what it might still become. Their hope points in 3 different directions, but all of it belongs to the same town. That is where Suncraft grabbed me. It can tug on your heart while keeping both feet planted in practical work. The game does not stop everything to deliver a giant speech about renewal. It asks you to build something, gather something, repair something. Then it lets the meaning emerge through what that work changes. Your protagonist has no dialogue choices, but I never felt detached from the people. The villagers respond too personally for that. You do not tell Hank that you believe customers will return. You help build a town where they finally can. Kale and Soot work the same way. Their requests are mechanically simple. A bed, a special meal, supplies for monitoring the volcano. But those little jobs accumulate. By the end, learning that Kale and Soot might finally seek adventures beyond their long watch feels like somebody has quietly taken a weight off their shoulders. The world building also knows when to be ridiculous. A giant bee joins industrial operations. Ghosts become warehouse employees. Crabs surrender graphite when struck and appear to hold no lasting resentment. The Mountain Inn exists beneath penguin supervision. Suncraft never pauses to point at these things and demand that you notice how quirky they are. It lets absurdity and melancholy live together. This is what makes the world feel warm instead of manufactured. But I will admit, I still wanted more from the ancient laboratory, the cave, and the lighthouse ruins. On a different note, the small pillar puzzle near the lab where you solve riddles and bring the corresponding resources shows how enjoyable exploration can be when it exists simply because finding a secret is fun. A few more moments like that would have made the island's history feel even more embedded in the landscape. But the story is heartfelt, cohesive, and much richer than the modest description suggests. Story and world building gets a 4.5 out of 5. Thankfully, Suncraft is also stable enough to let you become emotionally attached to all of this without later replacing those emotions with a corrupted save file. Moving into technical. Across roughly 15 hours, I experienced no crashes, broken quests, lost progress, major bugs, or disappearing items. Nothing folded itself into a wall and began whispering instructions from beyond geometry. Even when my base became crowded enough to require zoning legislation, the game remained very stable. That matters enormously in a crafting game. When you are maintaining stockpiles, production chains, automated workers, and several ongoing projects, technical problems do not simply interrupt the experience, they make the work feel unsafe. Suncraft never made me nervous that an hour of preparation might disappear because the game had suddenly developed experimental ambitions. The interface remained readable, I played with mouse and keyboard perfectly fine, and the game stayed responsive even after the island was littered with machinery, chests, ghost bees, and the consequences of my management style. The only major usability issue comes after the ending. The credits return you to the main menu, so players may assume everything is finished and never reload their save. They should. When you return, the villagers have new dialogue. People who spent the game talking about survival and maintenance begin talking about possibilities. The game could signal that post-credit return more clearly, but technically my experience was remarkably clean. Because of that, technical gets a 5 out of 5. Now for the promise check, who this game is for, and my official verdict. Suncraft absolutely delivers on being a cozy village crafting adventure. It just forgets to mention how much heart is hiding beneath the machinery. This is not a traditional farming sim, and it is not an endless sandbox. It is a structured, story-driven crafting game with substantial production chains, meaningful character quests, and a clear ending. It is for players who enjoy gathering with purpose, players who like preparing, automating, improving systems, and watching all that practical work slowly change a community. Players may bounce off if they dislike heavy resource processing, linear progression, storage management, or upgrades that only reveal their importance after you've already spent an afternoon learning their consequences. My verdict is buy now, with the usual caveat that value depends on the final launch price. I received a complimentary key from Spicy Tuna Games, but that does not change the 15 hours I played, the near complete achievement list, or the alarming evidence that I gathered 50,000 resources and interpreted this as leisure. Suncraft begins with Hank maintaining a shop the island has almost stopped needing. He keeps the shelves ready anyway. You spend the game doing the same thing, stockpiling resources, improving machines, preparing for projects you cannot yet see. At first, both forms of preparation look a little unreasonable. By the end, neither was wasted. The doors are opening, trade is returning. Nikko has turned inherited history into a plan for renewal. Penny can look at the town's needs without assuming scarcity will define all of them. Kale and Soot can imagine lives beyond standing guard. The lighthouse is the largest thing you rebuild, but the real gift is not simply the light it casts across the water. It is the light it ignited in everyone beneath it.